Greetings. Welcome to Introduction to SQL for Excel Users, Part 9, Basic Windows. I am your instructor, Dave Langer. The subject of today's video are windows. Now, windows are kind of an abstract concept, but they tend to be extremely useful in practice. In fact, if you use SQL a lot for pulling data for analytics, whether you do the analytics in the database or you pull the data out of the database and do analytics in another tool like Power BI, Tableau, R, Python, whatever it might be, you end up using windows all the time. Windows of data are super useful. So per my modus operandi, we're going to start with Excel and try to gain a sense, an intuition of what windows are, and then see how they're actually implemented for real in SQL. Okay, so here I am in the Excel spreadsheet for part 9 of the series here. And what you can see here, as usual, is our call center data. It's all 120 rows of call center goodness here. All the goodness. Okay, in the past couple of videos, we have been working with what I will call, for lack of a better term, hard groups of data. These are exemplified in Excel by pivot tables and in SQL by the group by clause. So for example, I can take my handy dandy call center table here and I can transform it into hard groups quite easily. I can just click on here and say, hey, Excel, insert me a pivot table. And Excel says, cool. Pivot tables in Excel are all about working with hard groups. So for example, I can drop shifts into the rows, and now I have a hard group. And I can then create hard groups of groups. I can put wage type in there. And notice now I've got groups of groups. And these are all hard insofar as you notice that this tabular representation is now transformed into a smaller, more compact form. We've gone from the full table of 120 rows down to essentially how many rows here? 12. Looks like, right? Yeah, 3 times 4, 12. 12 rows. This is a bit of a transformation. The data has been transformed, and it's been transformed by the hard groups. And for example, I can just drop level 1 operators in there. And as we well know, Excel is totally happy with this and says, oh yeah, sure, Dave, it's a numeric column, so I'll sum it by default for you. And the summary function here is group aware, so I get the summary by groups. Groups within groups, and I also get it at the group level here. And we're all familiar with this. This is pivot table magic. It's Excel 101. Great. These are hard groups. Now, if we think about windows, the one way we can think about it is that these are quote unquote soft groups. Windows are soft groups. And let me show you what I mean. So if we go back to the call center data, what we can say is, look, you know what? I can create a soft grouping. So for example, notice that the date key here is repeated, 2014 0501, which corresponds to May 1st, 2014. And just to really make this pop, I'm going to color code it yellow. And notice that there's another group in here for the 2nd of May, 2014. And I'll make that one orange. And for the 3rd, we'll go ahead and make this one red. So what we can see here is now these highlighted items are soft groups. I haven't transformed the table, right? This is a hard transformation. I haven't done that. I've just called out that within the tabular representation, the full-blown tabular representation, I can identify groupings. I can identify soft groups or windows. We can call these windows. This is window 1, this is window 2, window 3, and of course I'm not going to color code the rest of the table, but you get the idea that there are logical subgroupings, logical soft groups, logical windows of data that I can operate under. Now what's really cool in Excel is that we can simulate this quite easily. We can go to the next level and we can simulate this. Okay, Dave, what do you really mean by soft groups? What do you mean by windows in practice in Excel? And the way we do this is by sorting the data, by doing multi-level sort. So what we can do here is we can grab the sort. And we can say, okay, cool, let's do the multi-level sort. So the first thing, let's say, is, okay, I'm going to assume that my windows are based logically on the date key. So I'll just say, go ahead and use the date key and smallest to largest, and that's fine. So what I've done here is I've now defined my first level conceptually of my soft group. I've used Excel's sort functionality to define my windows, and my windows are date keys. Date keys. So each one of these is going to be treated separately, because if I add a level, right, it says first sort by the date key. So these are creating windows, logical soft groups within the data. And then I can, let's do shift. Why not? Let's do shift. I can then say within that, I want to sort by shift. And A to Z is fine. Now, I want to pull this down here so you can see what's going to happen here. Notice that the overall structure of the table is not going to change, but the rows within the table will change as soon as I hit OK. And this is a result of me declaring a logical window based on date key. And then within those windows, I want you to sort based on the shift. So what's going to happen is midnight's going to pop up here because midnight comes before PM 1 and PM 2 because Excel's ignoring case here. So if I click OK, boom. Notice that the data has in fact changed. The structure of the table has not. It's still the same number of columns, It's still the same number of rows, but I have defined a logical window based on date key, and then I've asked Excel to perform an operation per logical window, sort by shift within each date key. So this is really, really important. So I'm going to go over it again. Okay, step number 1 is you create a window of data. This is step 1. Step 2, define the window of data. That's this right here. And then lastly, define the operation on the window of data, and that's sorting by shift within date key. Okay? Now, as you might imagine, this is super, super powerful stuff. As we'll see in this post, or excuse me, in this tutorial video post, and then in some subsequent tutorial videos, we're going to be using Windows a lot. We're going to be able to do cool analyses directly in the database. RFM analyses, Pareto analyses directly in the database, and they all rely on window functionality to work. And this is super powerful because if you do the analyses directly in the database, you're not limited by Excel, right? For example, most database servers have a lot more memory, a lot more horsepower than your average laptop. So you can actually do these analyses at scale. You code them up in SQL and you push them up to the database server, and whammo, all the data analysis goodness comes back to you. So windows are super, super useful. Enough of the hard sell. I'm going to go ahead and flip over to SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, so we can see how we actually do windows in SQL. Okay, here we are in SQL Server Management Studio, SSMS, and we're going to do our first attempt at a SQL window of data. And you can see here I've got a query here, which is legit SQL. I can run it, and it doesn't do anything interesting. Okay, so let's go ahead and build up our first attempt of a window of data. So the first thing that we need to do, and this mirrors the logical process that I just described using Excel, is we have to tell SQL that we want to use a window in the first place. And how we do that is by invoking a window function. And the most useful window function that I've found in my work is one called row number. So row number. This thing right here, this little invocation, this call to the row number function, tells SQL, hey, I want to create a window of data and I want you to do something with it. And SQL says, sweet, Dave, no problem. How do you want row number to work? So this is where I have to specify how I want the actual window to work. So to use the Excel analogy, this is equivalently conceptually to me opening up the multi-level sort window in Excel, this thing right here. Next, I need to define what is inside of that Excel multi-level sort window. That's what I'm going to do next, okay? And we say, all right, I want you to run the row number function SQL over, you need to use the word over here, and notice how it's highlighted in blue, over something. And as usual, it's going to be in some parentheses. And as we know from previous videos, we want We want a column name for this because by default, SQL's not going to know what to call it. So we need to tell it exactly what to call it. And I'm going to say, call it row num. Call it row num. So I'm just giving it an alias. Okay, this code doesn't work. It does not work as of yet because we haven't fully specified this. Once again, using Excel, as we saw in the previous section as an analogy, this is opening up the multi-level sort. What's in between these parentheses is the content of the multi-level sort dialog. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to define the window. And how you do that is you use partition by. That tells SQL this is the specification of how you should create the windows. Now, if you remember, in Excel, we use date key. So we can just say, all right, use date key. And this does exactly what we saw in Excel, right? It says, okay, Excel, go find every unique value for date key and use that as the window. So everything that is 2014-0501, that's one window. Another window would be 2014-0502, just like we saw in Excel when I highlighted them in yellow, orange, and red. This is what tells SQL to create those windows in the data. Okay, cool. So if we run this, though, we're going to run into a problem because it says, oh, hey, you need an order by. You need an order by. So when you use window functions, they work over these logical groupings, which is defined by partition by. This says, hey, create logical windows SQL in the fact call center table by the date key, create those windows. And SQL says, cool. But for me to actually do something, Dave, you need to order them somehow because row number doesn't make any sense unless I have some sort of ordering to determine what row is the first row, which row is the second row, so on and so forth. So you have to have an order by clause. So we can scroll down and fix this real quick and say, okay, look, you know what? I'm going to order by shift in ascending order. Notice this right here is conceptually exactly the same thing that we just saw in Excel in the last section. I opened up the multi-level sort dialog in Excel. I told Excel, I want you to first and foremost sort by date key, and then secondarily, I want you to sort by shift. That's what this does right here. Okay. And if I run this, lo and behold, I get what you would expect. See here, the date keys are all the same, and AM, midnight, PM1, PM2, AM, midnight, PM1, PM2, so on and so forth. Now, as I've said in previous videos, this is coming back in the order that we want, the sort order that we actually want. That's a result of this, right? Me using this window function. But generally speaking, it's still best practice if you put order by in there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. Order by FCC, date key, and then FCC.shift. Okay? Just to explicitly get the sort order that I want. That's just considered good practice. Okay. Outstanding. And notice the row numbers here. First one, second one, third one, fourth one. First one, second one, third one, fourth one. Now this, it might not seem like it. Okay, it might not seem like this on the surface. You might be like, wow, Dave, why are you so excited about this? That's totally cool. I get it. It turns out that this is wildly useful. Being able to sort and then understand which one is first and which one is last in a particular window grouping is wildly, wildly useful. And we're going to see this in subsequent videos, what I mean by this. But in my real life work, when I worked at Schedulicity as the VP of Analytics, when I worked at Data Science Dojo, when I worked at Microsoft as the Senior Director of BI and Analytics, I used row number all the time. All the time. It is wildly useful stuff. Trust me, it's wildly useful. So this is pretty cool, right? We've declared a window, right? And we've run over it and we got this really cool stuff. This is great, great stuff. Now we can do some more interesting things. Now that we have this, we can start asking some interesting questions of the data. So for example, which shift was busiest in terms of the highest number of calls? So we can do this. We can say, okay, cool. if we have windows, we can actually answer this question quite easily now. So what we do is we say, hey, SQL, create a window using row number. SQL says, got you, Dave. Cool. We'll use row number over some windows of data. Tell me what the windows are. I say, okay, over, that tells SQL I'm about ready to define the window. I want you to partition by date key, which makes sense, right? Because I want to partition by date key. And I can say, okay, for each day, which shift was busiest, okay, in terms of the number of calls. Sweet. So I've created my windows by day using the date key. And now my order by. And here's the cool thing. So if I want to know what is busiest, the easiest way to do that is to make the highest number of calls the first row inside of each window. And what I do is I just sort the calls in descending order, which means the highest one should be in row number 1 going forward. So I can just run this line of code here, and sure enough, check it out. AM for this day was the highest number, but notice in this window, PM was the highest number. And in this window here, was back to AM. Notice that this is awesome. This automatically tells me which shift within which day is the highest number of calls. And it's not always the same. Sometimes it's AM, sometimes it's PM, sometimes it's AM, sometimes it's, oh, well, look at that, PM too. This is awesome. As you might imagine, you end up starting to use this all the time. And in particular, the next video, video 10, we're going to introduce a new concept called a common table expression, or a CTE, which really dovetails well with row number and allows you to do some really cool stuff. So you might be a little bit underwhelmed right now by this, and that's okay. Wait for the next video and you'll be like, woo, yes. Okay, now I understand what Dave is excited about. So we can now use these windows to answer some interesting questions. So this is one example of a question we can answer. Now, if we scroll down, I've got another example question here. Which days were busiest in terms of calls, but I want it windowed by wage type and shift? Okay, because remember, we talked last time in video 8 about groups within groups, and groups within groups within groups, but those were hard groups. Right? We're using group by, where you're using a pivot table, and you physically transform the original table into a smaller representation based on those hard groups. Well, guess what? You can do the same thing now with windows without actually physically transforming the table. This is awesome. So let's go through this step by step. Hey, SQL, I want you to create some windows for me, and I want you to apply the row number function on those windows. SQL says, sure thing, Dave. We'll make it happen. Okay, I want you to run row number over the window. First of all, I'm going to actually use a soft group within a soft group. I want you to partition first by the wage type and then by the shift. SQL says, okay, no problem. I'll do that. I will go through the entire table of data and I will find all the unique values for wage type, and then I will find all the unique values of shift within each wage type and create a two-stage window, soft group. Excellent. And then I say, okay, and then I want you to, within those soft groups, within those windows, then please order by calls in descending order. So that means that the highest number of calls, once again, becomes row number 1. Because remember, my question is like, I want the busiest. I want the highest number of calls. That's what I'm interested in. So if I run this bit of code here, awesome. Now notice that date key doesn't matter anymore because I haven't made date key part of the window. So date key doesn't matter. First thing it does is it says find all of the wage types. And it says AM is a wage type. Excuse me. First, find all the wage types. Holiday is one of the wage types. Okay, cool. Within the wage type, find all the shifts. So holiday AMs, holiday midnights, holiday PMs, holiday PM2s. And then it goes to weekdays and then AMs and midnights and PM1s and PM2s. Those are my windows. Okay, sweet. For each one of those unique combinations of wage type and shift, so this is a unique combination, this is a unique combination, put in row number 1 the highest call number, the highest call number, the highest call number, the highest call number. And that's what it does. Once again, this is awesome. This is awesome sauce. This is great. You can do so many cool and interesting analyses with window functions. And as I said, we're going to look at something called RFM, recency frequency monetary analyses, which are really useful things to do. You can do it all in SQL. Write up your SQL code, push it down the database. You can do it over tens of millions of rows of data, lickety split. You can do Pareto analyses, which are extremely useful. That's all coming up further along in this tutorial series. So this is good stuff. As my dad would say, we're cooking with gas now. Okay, we're doing some real super interesting things with SQL. So that's it for today's video. I hope you're enjoying the content. If you are, please subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can get alerted to new videos as I post them. And until next time, I wish you happy data sleuthing.